The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we are looking at children's health challenges from a different perspective, one that includes critical thinking. We're not afraid to ask the difficult questions. Today, we're flipping the script, and my partner, co-author on the book Vax Facts, Dee Dee Hoover, she goes by Jam, just a mom. She's going to take the reins and ask me the questions that she's getting. So she tracks all the questions that you all send into CHD TV. Regarding what you're interested in, questions you may have. So she's going to hit me with some of the most common questions that you all have been asking. I actually don't know exactly what all I'm going to get asked, so we're going to see what happens here.
So I want to make one correction though.
Okay.
Polytommy tracks all the questions in CHD TV.
Okay.
However, we have 5 websites that people can submit questions to, and that's what I'm going to ask today. Is we get asked a lot of questions. So I call it frequently asked questions of a pediatrician.
Sounds good.
Okay?
All right.
So right now what's been happening, and I'm talking daily, I'm getting at least 1 or 2 of questions around this.
Okay.
And we have coached on this, or I've coached on this a lot this winter. Colds, flus, viruses, why are they lasting longer?
That's a good question. I can only make an educated, hopefully very well-informed guess, because we're hearing this a lot. People are getting sick this winter and they're staying sick longer. Why? Well, the interesting that's happened this year is we are seeing a number of different infections happening all around the same time at much greater magnitude, frequency. So we're talking about actual flu, which really is only at the peak of the flu season. About 10% of the cases of what looks like flu is actually flu, but we're seeing a lot of flu. We're definitely seeing a lot of RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and that can last a long time anyway. So it could just be that there's more RSV than usual this year would be one reason, but there's also pertussis going around. And I think it's a big year for pertussis. That's whooping cough. All these things, including COVID still going around, including all the normal colds and flu viruses that are going around, when they start stacking on each other or one into the other, it feels like you're sick for months. And actually with just RSV, for example, or pertussis, you can be sick. You can be coughing for weeks or even months, especially with pertussis. So I think that's the why of it all. There's a lot of things going on. Could there be a newish or an altered virus that's especially persistent and hard to clear? Yeah, it's possible. I mean, we saw with COVID, there was some funny business going on with the creation of SARS-CoV-2 in the biolabs and the bioweapons labs. I don't know that there's such a thing going on, but it's possible.
One of the questions I get asked is, like their kids will be sick for, I'm hearing 6 to 8 weeks, right? They can't go to school, coughs, all those things. But isn't it possible? I mean, one thing I personally wonder is, can't they, because their immune system is weakened by something, can't they catch something else? Aren't they going to be more likely to catch a different bug?
Absolutely. That's a phenomenon we see with vaccines too. So when you vaccinate against, especially the combo vaccines that vaccinate against a lot of different things, it focuses the immune system on those things against which you're vaccinating to the detriment of your immune system's ability to cover everything else. Okay, it's hyper focusing the immune system on just certain things that are in the vaccine. Well, to some extent that happens in real infections. So you're dealing with RSV and you're a little down and out because you're sick, and then you get exposed to the next thing, whether it's pertussis or the flu or COVID or whatever, or just a common cold. Vaccinated kids, the literature shows they get about 5 to 7 colds per winter. And if a cold lasts 7 to 10 days times 7, I mean, you're at a month and a half right there, just right. Cold on top of cold. Now you throw in RSV, flu, COVID, and no wonder.
Right. And you bring up a really good point that I'm going to really bring up is, but my child's unvaccinated. Why are they getting sick?
Well, unvaccinated kids still get sick, but they generally, I mean, my data and many other data sets now that are published show that unvaccinated kids are less often sick. And when they are sick, they get better quicker.
Right.
So this is definitely one of the huge advantages to not vaccinating, because your kids will will be healthier and less ill.
One of the questions that I get a lot is, my child's been sick for a long time. Does that mean they need antibiotics?
Well, the antibiotics question, when you go to a mainstream pediatrician, and I was one, by the way, I'm not diagnosing or treating, I'm just educating here on this platform. As a pediatrician, and I would get a sick kid come in and they've got all the respiratory symptoms, which are usually viral, by the way. You don't need antibiotics for viruses.
Why?
Because they don't work.
Oh, okay.
They do nothing to reduce viral infections. And the antivirals are almost worthless in almost all cases. I mean, there are rare cases where there isn't a specific antiviral you can use. Acyclovir, valcyclovir for herpes, for example, is one use. It can be done, but there's almost never a good pharmaceutical antiviral or antibiotic for most of the infections our kids have. We just need to support their natural immune system so they can combat it naturally.
So is there a time or a reason I would put them on? Because to be honest with you, parents, I get this all the time, is I don't understand the difference between viral and bacterial. So they don't understand that. And so then when a doctor tells them, you have to put them on an antibiotic because it's this or that, the parent, we don't understand. I have no idea.
So most pediatricians that are putting you on an antibiotic are covering the possibility that you have a bacterial infection. They are trying to prevent you from having to come back because your kid didn't get better.
Right.
And so it's kind of like insurance for them that you won't leave and be disgusted because the doctor didn't do anything, right? At least they gave me this antibiotic. So there's this huge incentive for doctors to prescribe. It keeps the parents happy. But honestly, parents, it's rare that you need an antibiotic. I mean, I know unvaccinated families who have children who are in their teens who have never had a single antibiotic.
Right.
That blows me away because my kids, I mean, one of my kids had 13 rounds of ear infections and antibiotics. My fault for buying into that as the way to treat it. Most ear infections do not need antibiotics, will get better on their own just as easily. Maybe it takes a day or two longer if you don't start the antibiotics, even in those cases where the antibiotics might work. So we need to let our natural immune systems kick in and reserve antibiotics for those rare instances where you actually do need them.
I've got this child that hasn't had anything, no vaccines, nothing, no antibiotics, and my child is really sick. Is there a reason that I would need to do an antibiotic?
There could be. So what I used to do in the winter when I had the sickest kids, right? So let's say I had 15,000 patients in my practice at the time, and I was seeing, at the height of winter, 20, 30 sick kids a day, back when I was super busy. And out of those 20, 30 sick kids, there was maybe one, no more than one or two, sometimes none. They were sick enough for me to think, ooh, they might need an antibiotic or they might need to go to the hospital, right? So you've got to figure that out.
That is a big thing, right? Is that whether or not my child needs an antibiotic, what are the signs and symptoms I'm looking at for something severe, and when do I need to go to the doctor, and when do I need to go to the emergency room? What's the difference?
You need to go to the emergency room when your child is scary sick, what pediatricians call toxic. So in my training, I took care of the sickest kids, right? I mean, I even ran an urgent care for pediatrics. So all the sickest kids in town were coming to me, and then I would help determine whether they need to be hospitalized or not.
Right.
That's sort of like the function of an ER now, a pediatric emergency room would be getting the sickest kids and trying to figure out, do they need to be hospitalized or can we send them back home with some approach?
Right.
The truth of the matter is, if you have a practitioner, if I were in practice, I'm not, I don't diagnose or treat, but if I were in practice and I could see your child, I mean, examine them would be nice too, listen to the lungs, the heart, check the ears and throat and all that stuff. But if I could just see them, make sure they're not struggling to breathe, they're not dehydrated, they're still, and you can get some of this by history, they're still drinking and eating, they're not at risk of being dehydration, and their oxygenation is okay. If you have a coughing infant or a coughing young child, or any age child, but it's especially the youngest ones who are more vulnerable to getting in trouble, and they've got respiratory symptoms, cough, they might have fever, body aches, sore throat, but they've got a bad cough and they're sick. How do you know if they need to go to the emergency room or the hospital? What you were asking me.
Right.
Well, there's a few things you can use to help make that decision, but I hope you have somebody on your court, on your team, that will help you look at that kid and somebody with a lot of experience with sick kids and they can just look at your child and go, oh yeah, no, you got to go, right? How would I know that if I was the one observing your child? Well, they may look really, really, really sick. They're not making good eye contact. They're just sort of eyes are almost rolling in their head. They go from irritable to lethargic, being sort of listless and out of it. And they're not eating well. They're not drinking well. They're working really hard to breathe. Okay, that kid's in trouble. If I had a pulse ox, it's a little box. The hospitals have fancier ones, but you can get a little box for like 30, 40 bucks. Put it on the finger, beep, 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 beep. The highest number you get, that's the accurate number. If that pulse ox never gets over 90, and you got a young child who's struggling to breathe, they've got to go to the emergency room. They probably need oxygen. And if they need oxygen, they're going to need to be hospitalized. If your pulse ox is 93, 95 higher, there is no oxygen need. The only issue for hospitalization is if they need IV fluids. If they don't need IV fluids because they're still drinking and eating, then you can tough it out, hang in there with them. And that's 99.9% of the cases don't need to be hospitalized. Pulse oximeter is the full name for ox. It's a little device that through a little light feature, it measures your pulse. It captures the amount of oxygen in each of those pulses of blood flow through your capillary system on your finger. And it's a really great tool. I had this Italian family once. I loved the way she put it with her Italian accent. No respectful Italian family would go into child rearing without a pulse oximeter. I'm thinking that's cool because it really is a useful tool. And, I know with COVID, we got shipped down the wrong path by worrying about the oxygenation for a different sort of illness. But these illnesses that are getting kids today that we're talking about now, knowing that their oxygen is fine, golden. You don't have to worry as long as they're still drinking and eating.
Something that I've dealt with a lot and in coaching these parents that call us is that just because they're coughing doesn't mean their oxygen is low.
Oh, absolutely correct.
And I think that's the thing people get afraid of the most is what are those symptoms? I'm at home. I'm not going to the doctors. Right. I've heard of people say, well, I've called the nurse online, their doctor.
They'll tell you to go to the ER.
Yeah. And so explain why.
So if you called me, let's say I was your pediatrician back when I was in practice and I happened to be on call, which in the old days I used to do a lot. And you're the mom and you tell me, I'm listening on the phone and you're telling me, yeah, my child's lethargic and they're breathing hard and they're coughing all the time. You use those words, lethargic, or they're super irritable, they're lethargic, they're listless. I can't take a chance and reassure you. I haven't even seen the child. I don't know what they're looking like. I don't know what their pulse oximeter is reading. I don't know their respiratory rate. I don't have enough data. And honestly, I would need to eyeball that kid. And by eyeballing that kid with the experience I've had, I would probably be able to go, ooh, I think you probably should go in, right? Or a lot of the time I go, kid looks fine, but here's what you need to watch for, right? So there's things like how fast is the infant breathing? If we're talking about an infant, if they're breathing 60 breaths per minute or more, that's 1,000, 2, 1,000. Okay, their oxygenation is going to be right around 90. They're right at that point where if it gets any worse, they're going to need oxygen and they're going to need it fast and they're going to need a lot of it. Okay. And really the beautiful thing about young kids is they all get better if you provide them the support they need. If they need oxygen, they need oxygen. If they need fluids, they need fluids. But other than that, and those rare instances where they might need antibiotics, so we would do, if your kid is close to being hospitalized or needs to be hospitalized, you do blood work. It helps you. Is this viral or bacterial? You do swabs. We used to swab kids for 30 different things in one nasal swab. And it included coronavirus before we had COVID. It included influenza A and B. It includes adenovirus. It includes all the bacterial things for which you do need antibiotics if you've got pneumonia from those things. So there's a lot of information you can get, but a lot of this can be managed at home if you have a team that knows what they're doing.
We had a baby whose oxygen was low. They lived further away. On their own, they took grandma's oxygen and gave the baby some oxygen and the thing went up. Still had a fever. So the one thing I feel like we do have to talk about, and I want to ask you is, does a fever play into any of this? And when is a fever dangerous? Because that's the big thing I always ask. Do they have a fever? If they don't have a fever, I don't think they're fine.
Well, they're fine if they're also breathing and eating and drinking.
Okay.
They could still be in trouble and not have a fever because especially young infants, less than 2 months old, they don't always make a fever. It's very interesting. We're able to make a fever. The older we get, the more robust our immune system gets. It's part of a natural immune response is to mount inflammation, mount a fever. That's what attacks the infecting organisms. So here's what you need to know about fever. If your baby is beyond 2 or 3 months, I would say 2 months is a safe cutoff. Before 2 months, and if you have a real fever, just go get that baby seen. So we're talking 100.6, 38.4 if you're using centigrade instead of Fahrenheit, or above. So if you're above 38.4, if you're above 100.6, and your baby's less than 2 months old, just play it safe. Go get that baby evaluated. There's enough of a chance, it's still low, like in the 2%, maybe at the most 4% of those infants actually need antibiotics. So that means 96 to 98% of them do not need antibiotics. But you don't want to miss that 2 to 4% who might have a serious blood infection or meningitis. And
They're going to have other symptoms though, just them besides a fever, right? Because
they would, and 98% of those babies don't have anything serious, and all they have is a cold or the flu, or but you don't want to miss that 2%.
Okay.
But the symptoms still in little infants is, are they breathing okay? Are they drinking and eating okay? And are they alert? Do they at least have moments of alertness where they're looking you in the eye, or maybe they're smiling already? And you get that reassurance that, okay, they're there, they're home, somebody's there, right? Look in the eyes, and you're getting that connectedness, and they're still hydrated and still eating and drinking, you're good. But if they have a fever and they're under 2 months old, to address the fever thing. Now, the flip side of that is you got a 3-month-old who's got 103. Oh my gosh, what if it's 104? Well, at 104, the risk of a bacterial infection starts to go up. But below that, as long as they're still looking fine, they're breathing okay, they're hydrated, they're eating and drinking, and they're not the toxic thing. They're not like really lethargic and irritable and nobody's home. Sometimes in those cases, when you get up above 102, you got to bring the fever down and see if they still look okay.
Right.
Right. So you can sponge bath, lukewarm washcloth or sponge or whatever, as the water evaporates off your body. Within 5-10 minutes, you can bring that fever down. Now, how do they look? Because if you're 104, most babies look delirious. They look scary sick.
Right.
Get the fever down below 102 and they're like, oh, I feel better, and they want to play. You're good.
And doesn't that kind of go for all the ages too? Because again, we get a lot of older kids, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, who parents are really worried they've all of a sudden started this fever, and yeah, it's only 102, 103, but they can't get them to wake up. So there's a lot of things you're looking at.
If you can't get your kid to wake up, you need to sponge them down, get that fever down fast. And if they're still not waking up, that's 911 material.
Yeah.
A kid who's not waking up, spray them with some cold water. If they don't wake up to that, you get to the hospital right away.
And you're right. I think it's okay too. I think parents need to know. And again, and you've actually addressed this, I think that what happens for parents with unvaccinated children is they will stay home longer and they'll be more leery, and especially of calling 911. Because if these people come into their home, we feel vulnerable, right? We don't want that to happen. But again, explain, and if you could also explain the differences between lethargic and agitated, because that's when I'll have parents say, my child's super lethargic. And what they mean is they're cranky and fussy, and that's normal, right?
Yeah, you're sick. You're sick. So you and I coach, and as part of that coaching, if it's long distance, which usually it is, we get to see that baby on the screen, right? And 99.9% of the time, both of us have worked with so many kids for so long, we can look and go, yeah, your kid looks great. The mom was calling this kid lethargic or irritable, and they're like smiling and playing and nursing or whatever. It's like, yeah, this looks good. Now, we're not diagnosing or treating. We're just observing with them as being part of their team, and giving them tips on things to think about. Right.
Well, and I think that parental support is really important too. I think when I tell people, if you don't have, like most of the people that reach out to us are new moms that don't have family members that can help them with whether or not their child is really sick and needs to be seen.
Yep.
So what are some of the other things that we can do for these kids when they're sick? You mentioned for a fever, you can
get the fever down. Yeah, don't be afraid of the fever. If your kid's not really out of it, or they're not crazy irritable and the fever's less than 102, I would say do nothing for the fever. Fever is the proper immune response to an infection.
Right.
And by bringing it down, you're actually harming the body's ability to kill and suppress the viral or bacterial infection. So we like fever. That's a robust, good immune response. So that's absolutely something to do. Too often we're reaching for fever control medicine. Do not ever give Tylenol. I was about to bring that up. I trained my patients for 20 plus years, get Tylenol out of your house, period. That way you're not even tempted to go use it. It has no place. Ibuprofen is not as bad as Tylenol for a number of reasons, although it still can have problems. But you can't give ibuprofen before 6 months. So that's just something to remember. But there are natural things one can do if you do need to get the fever down, and especially just sponging down if it's a short-term thing. You need to see how your kid looks when the fever's lower.
What is the reason you would use ibuprofen or something for a child? I think where parents get concerned is my kid's not sleeping. And if the kid isn't sleeping, because rest is one of the most important things, right? So can you address that? When can we use ibuprofen or something else if our child is just beside themselves with discomfort and pain?
Right. So some of our viewers who are major league natural people, know how to use, curcumin, turmeric. You make this golden thing with some natural honey. Your kid should be over a year before you use honey. There are some natural fever reducers and homeopathics. You can definitely look into that. I'm not an expert on that. Just know, don't let fever be your defining symptom.
If my child is tested, and I hear this happening a lot. But I took them to the doctor's office, pediatrician's office, and they tested positive for something like strep throat or something like that. And I really don't want to give them antibiotics. Is there a reason do I have to?
It depends. So if they tested positive for a viral infection, no, they don't need antibiotics.
Okay.
So if they came back positive for RSV or for influenza A or B, maybe they're testing for other viruses, usually not. But you absolutely don't need antibiotics for viral infections. And when you've proven a viral infection, you absolutely don't need antibiotics, right? At least at that point, unless in the context of an infection, even if it's viral, your immune system is suppressed, and it is more likely that you get a bacterial infection, or it's more possible than someone who doesn't have an infection. So that's where it started as a viral infection, as RSV, as flu, as a cold. And now they've got a higher fever, and now they're getting sicker. They're coughing worse. Either perhaps they have pertussis, which can be treated with high-dose vitamin C and maybe an antibiotic called azithromycin, a Z-Pak, or they've gotten a different bacterial infection on top of the viral infection. We had stories of a couple deaths from measles this past year in Texas. Well, I spoke with the team of doctors that saw those kids and those who analyzed the medical records of those kids. They didn't die from measles. They died from inappropriate treatment of other infections that came on top of the measles. So measles can make you pretty sick. Well, if you then get a mycoplasma pneumonia, which is the most common cause of, school-age kids getting pneumonia, that needs to be treated. Certainly if you have an actual pneumonia, and those kids weren't put on the correct antibiotic. So there's a whole rationale for which antibiotic you pick for what situation. And sometimes you need to use them, but it's very rare that you do.
We hear so much about antibiotics and things and how those are horrible for our kids.
Yes.
So they have a bacterial infection. Do I have to use?
So no, my kid who got 13 rounds of antibiotics for ear infections, I wonder how he would have done had he gotten 0. Because guess what? He probably would have been just fine. There's something that happens when we repeatedly treat ear infections with antibiotics is they actually are more prone to getting more ear infections. It's because we're disrupting the gut flora and the microbiome in the intestinal tract, and that microbiome is responsible for a lot of our immunity. So we are compromising their immune system by all this antibiotic use and overuse. So antibiotics have a place, but it should be last resort for bacterial infections that are serious, not for colds and coughs and flus and, ear infections and, strep throat I would treat with antibiotics. I know a couple naturopaths who feel confident enough that they can get people through a strep throat without antibiotics. I don't fault them necessarily. I remember having discussions with various naturopaths, and some felt like I did. If it's an actual bad strep throat, probably better to treat it.
When can I send my kid back to school? Because I work. That's one of the questions we get a lot is we have working parents that they're having to take off work to be with their child, and that's one of the reasons that kids get sick, right? Or at school and childcare. So when do I have to keep my kid home and when can I send them back?
So quarantine works, folks. I mean, if another massive, horrible infection hits our world, I'm going to stay home. I'm going to stay out of public places, but I'm not going to worry about it. Because if I'm not around the sick people, I'm not going to get sick. When you send your kid to school, you are exposing them to everything that's going around. Let's just face it. Kids are in close quarters and their hygiene is borderline. I mean, hand washing, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to share their germs. I mean, they're coughing and sneezing and touching their noses and everything else. So, except for when there's a massive outbreak of, say, whooping cough or measles, something like that, that can truly at times get serious, I would feel fine sending kids to school when they're getting exposed to colds. Everybody's already had a cold. Same with RSV, by the way. You cannot prevent your kid from being exposed to RSV unless you just keep them home, period. During RSV season, almost every infant gets RSV. If you're under age 2 or 3 and you're in a daycare or school system, you're going to get RSV, and you're mostly going to do fine. But if you can avoid getting RSV, I think that would be great. So the reality of what parents are doing, because remember, we were talking at the top of the show, you get 5 to 7 colds. Most parents are vaccinating. Their kids are going to be sick the whole winter. The parents are going to have to stay home. Somebody's going to have to stay home for much of the winter. It's not practical. It's not the reality that most parents can live with. So what they're going to do is, give a little, if they're over 6 months, give a little ibuprofen and off you go to school. So you don't get that call, the kid's got the fever at school, right? Ibuprofen, off you go. And the same would, oh man, I was such a bad parent. I would give ibuprofen at bedtime. Because I didn't want them to wake me up in the middle of the night with a fever.
Oh my God.
I am not saying that's what you should do.
No.
You can take a young child, an infant, and co-sleep. If you don't have a fever and your body's normal temperature and they're warm, their being up skin to skin against you and your body's not warm could actually reduce their fever. That could go either way. If you tend
It's a whole nother subject.
If you tend to create a lot of heat, then don't do that. Don't create more heat.
Should I just keep my kid home and homeschool my kid in the winter? Because is it better that they don't catch anything?
So if you can do that, there's certainly nothing wrong with it. I would support that. It's not a reality for most parents, but you don't need to be afraid of infections either. I mean,
Well, I guess that's my
infections are exercising the immune system.
right.
So, I mean, like we get calls all the time about travel. Right? I'm afraid to go on an airplane.
Right.
And here's the thing I'll tell. If you have a new baby, that first 2 months, don't go out into public spaces, especially in the winter. Definitely avoid plane travel if you can. I mean, being a pediatrician for as long as I was, it was like clockwork. You go on a vacation, but you go on a plane and it's between December and March. You come back sick. Somebody
Even
at
if
that
you're
reunion, yeah, even if you're an adult, somebody at that family reunion, at that gathering was sick because so many people are sick at that time of year, and you come back sick. Who wants that, right? So if you can avoid that, great. But should you be afraid of it? Absolutely not.
No, I think that's where, and I guess I've been saying it wrong, is when parents will say that, should I just keep them home and avoid them ever getting sick? My response is, I have always thought and been told, and I do want you to address, is that we do want them, I've always told parents, we do want them to catch things in order to build the strength of their immune system. Is that?
Yes, that's fine. However, and I used to say that because most of my patients kids were in daycare. We had
Right.
2 parents working and they had no other way to do it. And so if that's your situation and you don't really have a choice, it's fine. Go with it, right? If you have a choice, would your kid be better off maybe being homeschooled for the first couple, 2-3 years of life, and then when they're a little older and their immune system's more developed, then get all these infections? Yes, it would be better. When you have a more robust immune system, so the first 4 to 6 months, you are relying on the immunity your mom transferred to you through the umbilical cord. And those antibodies last 4 to 6 months. During those first 4 to 6 months, you're also starting to develop your own immune system, but it's not super robust. There's a reason that infants and newborns don't react to very many things. And that's because they've got to survive in this world. And if they were reacting to everything, it wouldn't work. So the infant, the newborn, in the womb and the newborn, the immune system is somewhat suppressed, but you do have that natural immunity that came from mom.
Okay.
All right.
I think we covered most of them because again, that this time of year, we just get so many questions around that. We have Kids First Forever and you coach and a personal coaching they don't always need when they have these simple questions. Don't you offer something?
Yes, you can have a coaching session with either of us online. We're face to face. We're going to be part of your team and help you with whatever situation you're going through. The problem with simple questions is there's more to it. And so we would ask for some background information so that we make sure we're not misleading you or misguiding you. We're not diagnosing or treating, but we're just helping you with information that might help your situation, whatever it may be. And I can do some of those by email. So you have your question, you give, Dee will make sure you give us the information we need to give you a proper response. I think the beauty of becoming one of our coachees, if you will, is that you're part of our family. And the combination of these two here is pretty powerful because I have the pediatric background and this woman has intuition like you wouldn't, you can't believe. God guided, an amazing coach. So we are available at kidsfirstforever.com. And I really hope this show was helpful for somebody. I look forward to seeing you every week and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks for watching.
Okay, we're live. Can you tell everyone your name, please?
My name is Danette Gillingham.
And is this a story about your mum?
This is a story about my mother, yes.
Okay. So had your mum taken the COVID-19 shot?
Absolutely not.
Did she? Why not?
She, I was aware of the dangers of vaccines. In fact, my mom and I talked when I have two sets of twin girls, and when they were born, I remember her telling me, don't get vaccines for them until they're old enough to talk to you and tell you how they're feeling. And so I researched vaccines. So I was against vaccines from the beginning. So when the whole COVID thing went down, it was obvious to me that there was some definite agenda behind it and that there was a lot of lies being told. And I could see very clearly that they were pushing that COVID wasn't what they were telling us it was, and that it was possibly like a Trojan horse to bring in something worse. And in my mind, it was very clear that it was the vaccine. So my mom and I had many discussions, and she was on board with that. She said, I don't want the vaccine, so I'm not getting it. So no vaccine for her.
So what made her go into hospital then? Did she have one of those pulse things on her finger?
We had a pulse, like at the tester at home. My entire family, we had been on a little vacation and we were out of town. All my kids got sick. We all got sick and we knew we had COVID. We came back into town and I said, don't go over to Grandma's. We lived next door to her. And I was sick. I was out on the couch and I had it and I did not get tested, but I knew that's what it was. We had kind of been warned that summer of 2021 that I had heard from a nurse that she had been told to get ready because there was going to be an influx of COVID patients coming into the hospital. And she asked her supervisor how she knew that, and she said, shut up, you know what's going on, just do what you're told and get the rooms ready. So we kind of thought, okay, something's going on. They're going to re-release something. So we all got sick and we knew how to take care of ourselves at home. We didn't know all the details about what protocols were going on in the hospitals because it had been 2 years since the whole thing had started, and we had heard the nightmare stories from the beginning about what was going on in the hospitals in New York. And my mom had said, if I get this, don't put me in the hospital, and absolutely do not put me on a ventilator no matter what happens. So she already had a DNI on her paperwork. So we all got sick. I was sick, and we did not go over to Grandma's house, but it didn't matter because whatever had been released or if it had been shed by the vaccinated, I don't know how they did it, but there definitely was something. And in our valley, it came across very strong because people got very sick that summer. So it was like the end of July, beginning of August. She got it anyway. She got it from someone at her church. So I was sick. I couldn't really check on her. by the time that I started feeling better, her and my dad had both been sick, and nobody had really been checking on her. My dad had he never got to the point where he was bedridden. So he was taking vitamins and like 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day and wheatgrass juice and just pumping himself full of stuff. And she wasn't. So by the time I got to go check on her, her oxygen levels were in the 80s, low 90s. She had passed out that morning and she couldn't figure out what had happened. She was very dehydrated. She was running a fever. She had it. She had the COVID, whatever it was. But I felt like, I can treat you at home. We're going to take care of you. I'm going to get you hydrated. We're going to take care of this. My family, however, my brothers, my siblings, people were panicking a little bit. And they felt like at the end of the day, we needed to try and get her the monoclonal antibodies if possible. We asked her doctor to do that, and the doctor refused. So against our better judgment, we called an ambulance to come and get her, because we felt like she needs oxygen, she needs fluids. That's it. We'll put her into the hospital for a day or two, get her oxygen and fluids, and then she'll come home. So we called an ambulance, and they came and got her, and that was the last time that she was at home. She checked into the hospital August 13th, 2021. We were not allowed to go in there with her. They did not, I think she was in the emergency room for a good solid day and a half before they put her into a room.
Were you texting with her or something?
We were texting with her, and as soon as she was put on oxygen, she began to feel better. And she said, I'm eating, they're bringing me food, I'm feeling better. And she was very clear and lucid in her text messages. They all made sense. So we felt really good about it. Like, this is what you need. You're going to get hydrated. As soon as a doctor sees you, then they'll contact us and let us know what exactly is going on, what your diagnosis is. So we waited. We did not hear from a doctor. We waited a couple days. We were calling in constantly, and she kept saying, no one's talking to me. I don't know what's going on. After a couple of days, we finally get a doctor to call us back, and they said she does have double COVID pneumonia. And my sister's husband called me and said, Mom, just talked to Laura on the phone, my sister, and she's acting like that she's not going to make it. And I was like, what are you talking about? No, she's fine. She needs some hydration. She's going to be fine. So I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what I had missed. So at this point, finally we get a doctor. A doctor calls me and says, I would like to set up a Zoom call with your family so we can talk about your mom's condition. I'm like, okay, finally, we're going to get some answers. This is about on day 4. So the doctor calls us. My mom is on the Zoom call. We're on the Zoom call. And we thought this doctor was just going to tell us, this is her diagnosis. This is what we need to treat her with. This is how long she'll be here, and then she'll be coming home. This doctor proceeded to coach us in to changing her DNI status so that she could be intubated. She was a palliative care doctor is what she was. She had been coming into my mom's room every day via Zoom call to coach my mom into taking morphine and dying, because without saying it, they were basically treating her like she was dead on arrival. They knew she was unvaccinated, and they were treating her like she was going to die, and she might as well accept it, and we might as well accept it. And the quickest and easiest way to just go about that is just to take the morphine, and if she wasn't going to go on the ventilator, then she needed to probably just take the morphine. So this is what this doctor was doing. She was coaching us and coaching my mom. She didn't come right out and say those things, but you could read between the lines that that's what was happening. And we were appalled when we realized this doctor had no intent to heal my mother, giving her zero hope, that this was like psychological thing that was going on, and she was making my mom feel totally hopeless. So we began calling all the more vigilantly the administration if we could get a hold of them. It was very hard to get anyone to call us back. It was very hard to get communication from them. We would call and a nurse would say, she's doing fine, she's stable, and that was it. And we didn't know what that meant exactly, but it came to the point where my mom could no longer text us or talk back to us. I finally did get the infectious disease doctor to call us back and to give us a list of the medications they had put her on without our informed consent, and my mom did not know what those medications were or what they were used for. I realized that the remdesivir was horrible, and I requested, please take her off of that. That shuts down, it gives renal failure, it shuts down her kidneys and her liver. And they said, we're monitoring those things, and this is our policy and our protocol, and this is the medicine that works the best. Yet people were dying consistently every day in this hospital from this medicine. I said, please give her ivermectin, please give her hydroxychloroquine, please give her 10,000 milligrams of liquid vitamin C. This is what we want. My mom requested it. They refused. They would not take her off the remdesivir. So she ended up having 10 days of the remdesivir, no ivermectin, no hydroxychloroquine. At the end of 10 days, when she's not getting better and she can no longer communicate with us, and she had gone from just a nasal cannula oxygen to the full BiPAP mask at like full pressure and the highest amount of oxygen you can get. So at this point, the doctor finally calls us and says, your mom's not doing well. She hasn't had anything to eat or drink, or she's not eating and she's not drinking is what they told us, and we think you need to come in. So we all went down there. My entire family gathered at the hospital that night, and 2 at a time, we went into her room to see her, thinking she was like on death's door. We had no idea. When we walked in that room, her eyes lit up, and she was like, how did you get in here? She started talking to us. She was in a panic. She said, I have not had anything to eat or drink. They will not give me any water. They will not give me any food. I've been begging for food and water for days, and they're not giving me anything. She said, they've tied me up. They have hit me. They're trying to kill me. She's telling us this, and she was completely in her right mind. I knew my mom. She had been in the hospital many times for different things throughout her adult life, and I'd never seen her like this. She was like a tortured little animal. She was terrified and could not believe that we were in the room. She couldn't believe that we had gotten in there. So 2 at a time, we had my aunt and uncle come in, my dad had my siblings come in, and we all got to see her. And when we realized that the doctor had not been completely honest with us, that doctor actually came to the room, and we called her, and she said, we told her, it's not that mom couldn't eat or drink, it's that no one is giving her anything to drink or to eat. So she's being withheld just common care. Like, this is unacceptable, what's going on. And they would use the excuse that to take the mask off and to give her water could cause her to aspirate, and then she could die. So in the meantime, we'll just starve her to death and not give her anything to drink. So this is like their way of having this deniability. Like, we couldn't let her aspirate to death. So somehow my dad talked this doctor into letting my sister and I stay the night. Or no, we didn't stay that night. We came back the next day. And when we came back the next day, the palliative care doctor Zoom called my mom's room again, and we were there. And she said, how's your mom doing? And I said, she's doing great. And she believes that now that she has help, she can survive this. And the palliative care doctor was adamant that she see my mom's face. So we let her see my mom's face. And then she said, I'll call back tomorrow. And as soon as we hung up that call, I said, she is not to call back. She is not to come into this room. She is not to call my mother. That doctor is not to come into this room at all, ever again. They honored that. We did a report on that doctor. We wrote the hospital and told them that this was highly suspicious. It was manipulative. It was death coaching is what it was. At some point during that past week, a nurse did call my sister and tell her that palliative care was in the room with my mom at the moment trying to give her morphine to die. So this behavior, this sneaky behavior had been going on unbeknownst to any of us, even though my father's the one who had power of attorney over my mom's health. And my mom, she couldn't get on her phone any longer. She couldn't call us. She couldn't ask for help. There was no advocate with her. They had refused us entry into the room until after these 10 days. So at this point, they did eventually kick my sister and I out. I wish we would have had them call the police. Instead, we went home, and this was on a Friday. We went home, we wrote letters, we called everyone we could call. And on that Monday, my father got a hold of the charge nurse, and we told her, we read her the letter. We said, we're calling the administration, the state ombudsman, we're getting legal counsel. What's going on here is highly suspicious. She has had her human rights violated. Her choices have been taken away from her. She's been abused. She told us with her own mouth that you're trying to kill her. And once we read that letter to the charge nurse, we said we want her to have an advocate in the room with her at all times, period. Or we want cameras in the room. So that nurse, I don't know how or why, but she had mercy on us, and by the grace of God, and we had been praying the whole time, and we believe God opened the door. Our family was able to come and be in the room with my mom 2 at a time, 24/7. So my sister and I went first, and we took turns. My brother and my dad, we would alternate shifts, and we got to stay with my mom for the next 17 days. I have not heard of anyone else across the nation being allowed to get into the hospital like that. So we were able to witness from then on the care that she was being given or not being given. We were able to take control of the whole respiratory system that she had on her face and just remove the mask, give her a drink, give her a bite of something to eat if she needed it or she wanted it, brush her teeth. When we got into the room, her face was covered in blood. She had blood all around her lips and her mouth. Her nose, she had a bloody nose, because imagine rolling down the window and sticking your head out the car window and driving 60 miles an hour and having to breathe like that for days on end. She was on this machine for 33 days. They never did put her on a ventilator. They had left her naked until we got there, totally naked and exposed. So it was clear to us that they were using every possible method they could to degrade her and to just steal her dignity. We didn't know at the time that this was like the common practice that they were doing to all patients. I didn't know if it had to do with her being vaccinated or not vaccinated. We just knew that this protocol that they were pushing, they never showed us a piece of paper or a written document that had anything written down, what their policies that they kept telling us, this is our policy, this is our protocol. We asked for the right to try the other medicines, and the infectious disease doctor said, I do have permission to override the administration, but she never did. She's the one that prescribed the remdesivir for my mom. She at one point called me and said, you didn't hear this from me, but I did request from the administration permission to give her ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and the administration refused because they had been called that week and threatened by the FDA. So that means the FDA and the hospital administration are practicing medicine, and the doctors have their hands tied, or at least they felt like they did. To my knowledge, the administration doesn't have a license to practice medicine. So that is illegal. Who is holding them accountable? I don't know. To this day, I don't know. But when we began to follow the trail up the chain of command and see who is benefiting from this, and hindsight's 2020, now that I look back, you can follow the money and see every single protocol that they forced on these patients and forced on my mother, they were getting big bonuses for. And on her medical records, next to the things that they pushed on her, there would be a little dollar sign, like, we're getting a bonus for this one. So every time they gave her remdesivir, every time they put her on a BiPAP instead of just the nasal cannula, they got a bigger bonus. if they were able to get them on a ventilator, which is why they were pushing so hard for that, they got a bigger bonus. At the end of the day, when they killed someone through these protocols, they got up to $500,000 per patient. And the entire time we're in the hospital, probably every 20 minutes, there would be a code blue going off, which meant someone was in cardiac arrest, someone was dying from these protocols, someone in the ICU. It was constant, totally constant and consistent. Never once were the nurses totally honest with us. They kept saying, she's fine, any day she's going to turn around. They knew what was happening. They knew she was dying. They knew her organs were shutting down. They were totally dishonest with us. They did not like that we were in the room, that we were watching everything that they were doing, everything that they were giving her. And at this point, we were a little bit paralyzed because we still didn't understand what was fully happening. But there was weird anomalies, like the clock in her room every night would begin to spin out of control for hours on end. And I have a little film that I did of that, and I thought, this is weird. And my mom told me, the clock in here is crazy. And then I thought, if they're doing this to all the patients, these patients don't have a calendar on the wall. Their clock is spinning out of control. They're laying there naked. They're being withheld food and water. They're being tied down. They're being coached to take morphine and die. They're being treated like worse than criminals. It's psychological warfare. It's spiritual warfare. They were being murdered. The hospital had been weaponized. It was almost impossible to get in, and it was impossible to get her out. And they told us if we were to get her out, she would immediately die, that we didn't have the capabilities to get her enough oxygen at that point. And she had had so much of the remdesivir that, and the oxygen at high pressurized levels, that we couldn't replicate that, and her body couldn't be weaned off of that. So her lung ended up getting a hole blown through it. They kept telling us that she had fibrosis in her lungs, that she would never recover. And then I would go somewhere else. I would switch shifts and go home and do some research and realize, oh wait, there are things she can take to recover. This is not permanent damage. So we were being lied to constantly in the hospital. The infectious disease doctor told me straight up, we don't know anything about this remdesivir medication. It's like voodoo medicine. Yet they felt comfortable giving this to their patients, and day in and day out, week after week, watching hundreds of people dying, and they didn't think to stop it. Looking back, it absolutely blows my mind, the blindness of these people and the fear that they must be operating under. I don't know what kind of threats were going on in that hospital. Why haven't more nurses and doctors come forward to tell what they have seen? Because this is not right. There's a silent Holocaust going on in the hospitals. People are dying, and they still are doing this. They're giving remdesivir to babies, and no one's questioning it. And if you don't tell your story, no one's gonna know. And this is just going to continue to happen over and over and over again. And I know a lot of people think it's random, it's a random anomaly. It's not. To this point, I think everyone I know knows someone who lost someone in the hospital during this time. A lot of people just don't realize what happened because nobody was allowed in. But I'll tell you, we saw what happens. They destroy their bodies. My mom was black and blue. She had lost so much weight. By the end of it, her body could not flush any fluids out, so she was just leaking fluids out of all her pores, and it was horrific. I'm thankful to God that He allowed us to be with her. That was by His grace, because no one should die alone. It's inhumane, and it's wrong. We got to be with her when she died, and on her last day, she could no longer speak to us. Her oxygen was great that day. There were a lot of ups and downs, and there were moments when you thought she might be getting a little bit better, but you step back and look at the whole picture, and you could see that she was declining. And the whole time we just felt like this is such a spiritual battle that's going on. I mean, at one point, quite literally, lightning struck the hospital and all the power went out. And I just thought something supernatural is going on here. But at the end of it all, life and death is in God's hands. We know that. But that doesn't mean what happened is right and that we should continue to let it happen. They are treating people like they're in a concentration camp. These doctors have full authority, and they are intimidating, and they condescend you and treat you like you don't know anything. The infectious disease doctor did tell us at one point, if you can stay out of the hospital, stay out of the hospital. She said, if you could get your mom out, I would prescribe the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. So it's clear to us she was under the threat of losing her job from the hospital. At the end of it all, my mom's choice that last day was to either go on the ventilator or to just send them all away and take her off of everything. And we asked her if she was ready to go to heaven and meet Jesus, and if she wanted to go, and she said yes. She wiggled her toes. That's all she could do. And we took her off, and we sent all those doctors and nurses away, and it was completely 100% peaceful. And within 2 hours, she took her last breath, and I felt electricity go through her body. I felt a shock of electricity when she left this earth, and there was a palpable void in the room. And there's no amount of words that can describe the trauma of watching your loved one die for 17 days. But I'm thankful that we were allowed to be with her because she wasn't afraid. But so many hundreds of thousands of people were alone. So I want people to know they have rights, that they can fight for those rights, that they can stand up and fight to be with their loved one, to be an advocate. If you have to have the police called and a police report made out, do it. Don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated by these doctors. We can make a change. We can make a difference. We can save lives, but we have to speak up and tell our stories, no matter how painful it is. No one should have to go through this, and I don't wish this on anybody. But if we do not speak out, nothing will change. And this silent Holocaust needs to stop. It needs to end. And our nurses and our doctors need to have the courage to come forward and to speak out, to become whistleblowers. This has to stop, because it may not have affected your family yet, but it will eventually. And if we stay silent, we're not protected. It will come to our door. And that's really the message that I would like to get across to people, that the time to be silent is over. We have to speak out. We have to bring change. Nobody should have to die like that. There is a culture of death that is being pushed on us right now to accept that this is normal. And this is not normal. And it's unacceptable. With the vaccines and with babies being born dead, like, the numbers are astronomical. But if people don't start talking about it, nothing will change. So that's why I'm telling my story. Justice for my mom is what I would like to see. And I don't want anyone else to lose a loved one because of these protocols or because of the vaccine. Get informed. Do your homework. It doesn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes to find out for yourself the information. Don't believe what's being said to you. Go home and do your own research.
Thank you. Thank you so much for telling us.
Absolutely.
Sorry about